What's up, Ice and Fire fans? Welcome back to the House of Vine podcast and the fourth and final installment in the Brynden Rivers biography series. In my last three videos, we've been reviewing everything there is to know about Ser Brynden, starting with his birth to the Lady Melissa of House Blackwood and Aegon the Unworthy, to his tenure as Hand of the King, serving his nephew, King Aerys I, the second son of Daeron the Good, all the while dealing with a plague-like epidemic, unruly houses, and bitter relatives such as Aegor Rivers. He helped with putting down 3 Blackfyre rebellions, one ending with Bloodraven slaying Daemon Blackfyre, another without any blood being spilled, save for those executed for treason, and the third ending with the capture of Bittersteel and the death of another Blackfyre pretender. All of these actions and deeds, on the surface, leave us very little room to doubt Bloodraven's loyalty to the crown and to the realm. For now, at least. This is a man who, from the start, had played it close to the ruling Targaryen faction, that being the trueborn sons and grandsons of his own father, Aegon IV. He supported Maekar's youngest son's claim to the throne during the Great Council of 233, going as far as ridding the Seven Kingdoms of another Blackfyre pretender in order to strengthen House Targaryen's hold on the Iron Throne. Unfortunately for Ser Brynden, none of these seemingly good deeds were enough to dissuade the Honorable King Aegon, fifth of his name, from pardoning Bloodraven for the murder of young Aenys Blackfyre. And so, Ser Brynden and Rivers, along with 200 new recruits, many of which were his fellow prisoners at the Red Keep, men who served Bloodraven as archers in his raven's teeth, headed north to the Wall and the Night's Watch. It was 233 AC when Ser Brynden and company reached the Wall and took the Black. Martin has given us very little in terms of Bloodraven's time spent serving as a man of the Night's Watch. However, this doesn't mean we know nothing. In 239 AC, only 6 years after joining the Watch, Ser Brynden once again became a lord, having been elected as the Order's new Lord Commander. It isn't a surprise that Bloodraven would rise to the position of command in such a short period of time. Not only was he born and raised in the capital, he's a battle-tested warrior and a proven leader. It also doesn't hurt that many of the new men of the Night's Watch were Bloodravens. Since the men at the Wall elect their own leader, I think it's safe to assume that the majority of the Watch who voted for Lord Brynden were prisoners and former Raven's Teeth, the 200 men that accompanied Bloodraven north. The very last piece of information Martin gives us about the man Brynden Rivers is that in the year 252 AC, Lord Commander Brynden disappeared during a ranging beyond the Wall, and was never heard from again. Right? Wrong. Let's time travel 49 years into the future to Lord Brynden's reappearance in A Dance with Dragons. In both this series and my Melisandre POV breakdown series, I point out the fact that the corpse-like man Brandon meets in A Dance with Dragons, Bran Chapter 2, is without a doubt Brynden Rivers. Let's head over to that chapter and take a look at Brandon Stark's meeting of the Children of the Forest and our missing Lord Commander.
Come now, it is warmer down deep, and no one will hurt you there. He is waiting for you. The three-eyed crow, asked Mira. The green seer? And with that she was off, and they had no choice but to follow. The child went in front with the torch in hand, her cloak of leaves whispering behind her, but the passage turned so much that Bran soon lost sight of her. Then the only light was what was reflected off the passage walls. After they had gone down a little way, the cave divided. They passed another branching and another, then came into an echoing cavern as large as the great hall of Winterfell, with stone teeth hanging from its ceiling and more poking up through its floor. The child in the leafy cloak wound a path through them. There were more side passages after that, more chambers, and Bran heard dripping water somewhere to his right. When he looked off that way, he saw eyes looking back at them, slitted eyes that glowed bright, reflecting back the torchlight. More children, he told himself. The girl is not the only one. Small as she was, the child who was not a child moved quickly when she wanted. As Hodor thumped after her, something crunched beneath his feet. His halt was so sudden that Mira and Jojen almost slammed into his back. "Bones," said Bran. "It's bones." The floor of the passage was littered with the bones of birds and beasts. But there were other bones as well, big ones that must have come from giants, and small ones that could have been from children. On either side of them, in niches carved from the stone, skulls looked down on them. Bran saw a bear skull and a wolf skull, half a dozen human skulls, and nearly as many giants. The last part of their dark journey was the steepest, bumping and sliding downward in a clatter of broken bones, loose dirt, and pebbles. The girl-child was waiting for them, standing on one end of a natural bridge above a yawning chasm. Bran heard the sound of rushing water down below in the darkness. An underground river. "Do we have to cross?" Bran asked, as the reeds came sliding down behind him. The prospect frightened him. "No, boy," the child said. "Behind you." She lifted a torch higher, and the light seemed to shift and change. One moment the flames burned orange and yellow, filling the cavern with a ruddy glow. Then all the colors faded, leaving only black and white. Behind them, Mira gasped. Hodor turned. Before them, a pale lord in ebon finery sat dreaming in a tangled nest of roots, a woven wheelwood throne that embraced his withered limbs as a mother does a child. His body was so skeletal, and his clothes so rotted, that at first Bran took him for another corpse, a dead man propped up so long that the roots had grown over him, under him, and through him. What skin the corpse lord showed was white, save for a bloody blotch that crept up his neck onto his cheek. His white hair was fine and thin as root hair, and long enough to brush against the earthen floor. Roots coiled around his legs like wooden serpents. One burrowed through his breeches into the desiccated flesh of his thigh, to emerge again from his shoulder. A spray of dark red leaves sprouted from his skull, and grey mushrooms spotted his brow. Little skin remained, stretched across his face, tight and hard as white leather, but even that was fraying, and here and there the brown and yellow bone beneath was poking through. "Are you the three-eyed crow?" Bran heard himself say. "A three-eyed crow should have 3 eyes. He has only one, and that one red." Bran could feel the eyes staring at him, shining like a pool of blood in the torchlight. Where his other eye should have been, a thin white root grew from an empty socket down his cheek and into his neck. "A crow?" The pale lord's voice was dry. His lips moved slowly, as if they had forgotten how to form words. "Once I, black of garb and black of blood." The clothes he wore were rotten and faded, but once they had been black. "I have been many things, Bran. Now I am as you see me, and now you will understand why I could not come to you, except in dreams. I have watched you for a long time, watched you with 1,000 eyes and one."
And with that, let's return to the topic of sorcery, an issue that has repeatedly popped up in this series. Back at the beginning of this biography, we listen in on 2 separate conversations, one with a petty lord by the name of Eustace Osgray, the other with a septon serving at Coldmoat, Septon Sefton, in which they speak to Sir Duncan about Bloodraven. They both blame him for all the problems plaguing the realm, even going as far as to claim that Bloodraven controls King Ares through the use of spells. To get to the truth of these accusations, we must go all the way back to part 1, when I asked, who is Brynden Rivers? The singers, or the children of the forest, call him the last Greenseer. The maesters of the Citadel believe that the Greenseers were actually the wizards of the children, and although this is true in a sense, according to Bloodraven, his definition of the Greenseers is a bit more descriptive.
"Those you call the children of the forest have eyes as golden as the sun, but once in a great while one is born amongst them with eyes as red as blood, or green as the moss on a tree in the heart of the forest. By these signs do the gods mark those they have chosen to receive the gift. The chosen ones are not robust, and their quick years upon the earth are few. for every song must have its balance. But once inside the wood, they linger long indeed. 1,000 eyes, 100 skins, wisdom deep as the roots of ancient trees. Green seers.
So here we learn that the term green seer is just a label the singers gave those of them born with the special ability called the sight. The first green seers born during the Dawn Age would have been pure in their bloodlines, i.e., children, mommies, and daddies. Fast forward thousands of years to the last green seer, Bloodraven, and we arrive to an extremely unusual predicament. To put it simply, green seers are basically singers with shorter lifespans and powers, but they're children of the forest nonetheless. So how in seven hells was Bloodraven, a man with human parents, born a green seer? To figure out the how, we need to talk about bloodlines, naming traditions, and political alliances. Let's start off by discussing the maternal side of Lord Brynden, House Blackwood. House Blackwood is a noble house located in the Riverlands with deep ties to the north. They were one of the last houses to bend the knee to the Iron Throne following the death of King Robb. Their sigil is a flock of ravens surrounding a black shield charged with a dead werewood, implying that the Blackwoods worship the old gods. Next, let's discuss the subject of naming traditions, something that we see in all the great and smaller houses of Westeros. We know that many lords and ladies name their children after past members of their house, or names close to it. Rickard and Rickon, Tydos, Tywin and Tyrion, Edmure, Edmund, and Elmo. These are just a few examples. Keeping this in mind, let's consider the names of Brynden's mother and his full-blooded sisters. These are female Blackwoods with names starting with the letter M. Now, let's look at the Stark family tree found in the back of the World of Ice and Fire to look for any Blackwood females with names starting with the letter M. We only see one, which is Melantha Blackwood, but there have been other Blackwoods to marry Stark men, meaning there is some Stark blood flowing through Blackwood veins. Now, let's go back to the subject of bloodlines, in particular, the Starks' warging DNA. During the Long Night, the Starks warred with the Warg King and the Children of the Forest. When the King of the North of that time defeated the Warg King, he eradicated the king's male descendants, then married his sons to the defeated king's daughters. This is how the Starks obtained their warging abilities. Finally, let's talk about alliances. We know that in the Middle Ages and in the World of Ice and Fire, marriages are 9 times out of 10 political. It's not too far-fetched to believe that this Warg King and the Children of the Forest would solidify their alliance through marriage. If this is true, that means the Warg King's daughters who married into House Stark would have Singer blood inside of them. I truly believe this is how Bloodraven was born a Greenseer. Children of the Forest DNA being passed from them to the Warg King and their descendants, to the Starks, and lastly to the Blackwoods. So, is Ser Brynden a sorcerer? The answer could be yes, to the ignorant Westerosi that is. What he really is a human with both Warg and Singer blood mixed in his DNA, also including whatever secrets reside in his Targaryen DNA, the blood of old Valyria. At last, we arrive to some of the most thought-provoking questions readers ask themselves. Is Bloodraven good, or is he bad? Just whose side is he on? Does he fight for the side of ice, or for the side of fire? It's hard to say. The word good is merely a word applied to people who are convenient to our needs in some way. It's purely subjective. When talking about the Song of Ice and Fire series, Martin has stated that none of his characters are purely good or purely evil, as it is in the real world. That said, there is plenty of evidence that reveal for whom Bloodraven represents and/or serves, and that is the infamous Great Other, the Lord of Light's eternal adversary. Actually, I'm going to take this one a bit further. It's quite possible that Ser Brynden Rivers, aka Bloodraven, in fact, is the one and only Great Other. Now hold up for just a second. Before you run off to your kitchen so you can forge me a crown of tinfoil, consider this. I've said before in other videos that 90% of the time, if a POV character makes a certain assumption pertaining to the main story arc, Or if they dismiss something which they at first thought was true, it means they are either wrong for what they believe, or they were wrong to dismiss their original idea/thought. There's a perfect example located in A Dance with Dragons, the one and only Melisandre chapter that Martin has given us.
The dark recedes again for a little while, but beyond the wall the enemy grows stronger, and should he win, the dawn will never come again. She wondered if it had been his face that she had seen staring out at her from the flames. No, surely not. His visage would be more frightening than that, cold and black, and too terrible for any man to gaze upon and live. The wooden man she had glimpsed, though, and the boy with the wolf's face, they were his servants, surely, his champions, as Stannis was hers.
So let's break this passage down. First, the context. In the first half of her chapter, Mel is in her chambers at Castle Black, searching the flames of the hearthfire for Vision Centaur by R'hllor. During this search, a face appears in the flames. It is a man's face, corpse white, and has 1,000 red eyes. He's accompanied by a boy with the face of a wolf. Mel thinks that this man is the Great Other, but later changes her mind, believing these two to just be servants, but still the enemy either way. This brings us to Mel's reason for changing her mind about who Bloodraven is. That being, she didn't think he was scary looking enough. Well damn, Melisandre, I have to say, you got more balls than an Unsullied if that man does not frighten you. Although, I guess it would be hard to scare someone who can give birth to Stannis shadow babies, or someone who believes that burning infidels alive is the purest form of death, even though that's technically murder. For the rest of us small folk, we might have a different opinion. Some of us might think that seeing an extremely old man that looks like a corpse entwined in the roots of a centuries-old god tree that allegedly is just one part of a greater hive mind, who's also clearly missing most of his skin and has branches growing through one part of his body and coming out of a missing eye socket, adding that the one eye he does have is a glowing red, all the while surrounded by an uncountable number of skulls, to be, and pardon my French here, fucking terrifying. I'd probably drop a brown Ben Plum in my breeches. Oh, there's one last piece of evidence that possibly points to just whose side Bloodraven is truly on. Let's head back to A Dance with Dragons, Bran Chapter 3, and listen to the last passage in this series.
The great cavern that opened on the abyss was as black as pitch, black as tar, blacker than the feathers of a crow. Light entered as a trespasser, unwanted and unwelcome, and soon was gone again. Cook fires, candles, and rushes burned for a little while, then guttered out again, their brief lives at an end. The singers made Bran a throne of his own, like the one Lord Brynden sat, white weirwood flecked with red, dead branches woven through living roots. They placed it in the great cavern by the abyss, where the black air echoed to the sound of running water far below. Of soft grey moss they made his seat. Once he had been lowered into place, they covered him with warm furs. There he sat, listening to the hoarse whispers of his teacher. "Never fear the darkness, Bran." The Lord's words were accompanied by a faint rustling of wood and leaf, a slight twisting of his head. "The strongest trees are rooted in the dark places of the earth. Darkness will be your cloak, your shield, your mother's milk. Darkness will make you strong."
So there we have it, folks. Everything there is to know about Brynden Rivers, aka Bloodraven. It's been an interesting series, and I hope that you learned as much from watching this as I did in my researching this mysterious, yet extremely intriguing character. We can only hope that in the Winds of Winter we'll come to learn his true intentions for young Brandon and ultimately his endgame. In my next A Biography of Ice and Fire series, we will be learning everything there is to know about the infamous Euron Greyjoy. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to stay updated and be the first to watch newly uploaded videos.